House to come to order. Members will be at their seats. Clerks open the roll and you may record your presence. Please give rise and attention to our guest chaplain, the Reverend Tobias Schlingsepen of the First Congressional Church here in Topeka, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Representative Murnan.
Pray with me, please. O God, let us be present to you. In the Gospel of Matthew in chapter 25, verses 31 through 40, we read, "When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, then he will sit on the throne of his glory. All the Gentiles will be gathered before him, and he will separate people one from another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he will put the sheep at his right hand and the goats at the left. Then the King will say to those at his right hand, 'Come, you that are blessed by my Father, and inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me.' Then the righteous will answer him, 'Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry and gave you food, or thirsty and gave you something to drink? And when was it that we saw you a stranger and welcomed you, or naked and gave you clothing? And when was it that we saw you sick or in prison and visited you?' And the King will answer them, 'Truly I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these who are members of my family, you did it to me.'" Oh God, these words tell us that even those who do not know the Son of Man serve him if they address the needs of their vulnerable neighbors. These words are an implicit warning to those who call themselves Christians, shouting, "Lord, Lord," and yet do not do the will of their Father in heaven. You desire that we seek you in the midst of the vulnerable, the oppressed, and the afflicted, and you make our eternal destiny dependent on our doing so. Lord, I pray for the men and women who have been called to represent the people of Kansas in this House. In every bill they deliberate, may they be mindful of the criteria by which we will all be judged. In every bill they vote upon, may they know that you are the one who ultimately tallies their votes. Give them the courage to receive and live by your mercy. Be this day with children across our country as they go out on the streets to protest their own safety, and be with Chaplain Brubaker in her time of illness. Bless all of us this day and always. Amen.
Has every member had an opportunity to record his or her presence? Clerk will close the roll and take the attendance. On a point of personal privilege, the Speaker would recognize Representative Good.
Good morning, colleagues. If you are a member of a nonprofit organization or YMCA, would you please stand at this time? Volunteers, board members, and employees of these organizations. And body, I would like for you to turn and we will applaud here in a moment. But in the gallery today are people representing nonprofits in the state of Kansas. If you work or are a volunteer, we thank you. Today is Kansas Nonprofit Day at the State House. We have volunteers and leaders representing more than 20 nonprofits in the Capitol today, showcasing their organizations, mission-based work, and the economic impact of nonprofits in Kansas. I want to tell you a little bit of history, what they do for us. We have 27,000 nonprofits in Kansas. We, Kansans, give them $1.8 billion to charities each year, and they employ 9% of the state's workforce.
So today, in the Capitol, we have over 20 nonprofit organizations in the rotunda and on the first floor. Many will take your blood pressure. You are also encouraged to write a note to a child in your life in celebration of absolutely incredible Kids Day. All legislators are welcome to join the Y and other Kansas nonprofits here today, because we know you need to do that, at a networking reception from 4:30 to 6:30 p.m. at the Dillon House across the street. Please join in giving a round of applause for all the amazing work these great individuals do for our great state of Kansas. You get the last one.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and may my remarks be spread across the journal.
Without objection, so ordered. On a point of personal privilege, the Speaker recognizes Representative Garber.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. Good morning, colleagues. I have several honors to give today. I'll be as quickly as possible, so please hold your applause until all are acknowledged. Each year, as summer ends and school begins, high school athletes and coaches across our great nation are thinking about the possibility of winning a state football championship. In 2017, the dream came true for the Sabetha Blue Jays, my alma mater, as they traveled to Hutchinson to compete in the 3A title game. Although not picked as a serious contender at the start of the season, the team improved each game and found themselves competing in the state finals against our neighbors, the Marysville Bulldogs, a team known for a high-octane offense. While Sabetha's rushing offense was very, very good, having set the state record of 88 rushing attempts in a single game, the team prided itself on defense. When the Bulldogs lined up inside the Blue Jay 5-yard line for what would be their last chance to win the game, both teams' faithful followers held their breath. The defense once again answered the call with their 24th interception of the year. With time running out, the Blue Jay quarterback only needed to take a knee to secure the victory. Coach Michael and his staff had instilled in the team, beginning with the first practice, that each team member was an important part of whatever success they had. I asked the team members on the floor to please raise your hand as I call your name, and in the end, when we applaud, the remainder of the team and coaching staff are present in the gallery today. First of all, seniors: Wyatt Byer, Brandon Brownlee, Cole Ohm, Riley Herman, Isaac Sunderland, Kyle Grimm, Blake Fry, Trevor Kramer, Tanner Euclid, Josh Campo, and Seth Burdick. Juniors, Elliot Strom, Braden Cox, Mason Engelken, Joe Gruber, and Coy Roki. And sophomore, Gabe Garber. It is also my honor to recognize Coach Garrett Michael for being selected the 2017 State High School Football Coach of the Year. Coach Michael and his coaching staff did a phenomenal job in guiding these young men to a state championship. But in my opinion, Coach Michael and his philosophy of faith, family, and football has prepared them for success in the future. Coach, thank you for your part in shaping the lives of the Sabetha High School students who look to you for guidance. Finally, it is my pleasure to recognize junior Elliot Strom for his recent success. A few weeks ago, 4 members of the Sabetha wrestling team competed at the 3-2-1A state wrestling tournament in Hayes. At the end of the tournament, Elliot was crowned state champion in the 285-pound weight class. Congratulations, Elliot, and good luck next year. That's for the football team. That's for the football team. That's for you. Please join me in congratulating Sabetha Blue Jay football team, Coach Michael and Elliot, for their successes. Mr. Speaker, I ask that my words be spread across the journal.
Without objection, so ordered. Introduction of bills and concurrent resolutions. The clerk will read.
House Bill number 2777 by the Committee on Federal and State Affairs, an act concerning consumer protection relating to unconscionable acts or practices requiring technology protection measures on Internet accessible devices, enacting the Human Trafficking and Child Exploitation Prevention Act. House Bill number 2778 by the Committee on Federal and State Affairs, an act concerning state contracts relating to application of contract requirements regarding anti-Israel boycotts. House Bill number 2779 by the Committee on Taxation, an act relating to property taxation, enacting the Senior Citizen Property Tax Deferral Act.
Messages from the governor. The clerk will read.
Enclosed herewith is Executive Order number 1811. For your information, it concerns drought declaration. Jeff Collier, Governor.
On a motion to concur or non-concur on House Bill 2232, the Speaker recognizes Representative Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a motion to non-concur with the changes made by the Senate on House Bill 2232. House Bill 2232 has to do with electronic monitoring and elder care facilities. It passed out of this body by a vote of 124 to 1 on March the 23rd of 2017. The Senate has made some changes that I would like to review in conference. Mr. Speaker, I move that the House non-concur on Senate amendments to House Bill 2232 and that a conference committee be appointed.
Is there discussion? Seeing none. All in favor, say aye. Opposed, same. The ayes appear to have it. Ayes do have it. As conferees on part of the House, the Speaker appoints Representatives Davis, Gallagher, and Ousley. Majority Leader Heinemann.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the House resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole for the purpose of considering those items appearing under the heading of General Orders.
You heard the motion. All in favor say aye. Opposed, same. Motion carries. For the purposes of chairing the Committee of the Whole, the Speaker appoints Representative Garber.
Good morning, body. We have three bills to debate today. First bill is House Bill 2516. For the purposes of carrying House Bill 2516, the chair recognizes Representative Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, there were committee amendments. I move the adoption of the committee report.
You've heard the representative. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, body. The bill before you is House Bill 2516, which came out of the Judiciary Committee. And the bill basically provides immunity to civil liability when protecting a vulnerable person, a minor, or a domestic animal confined in a hot car. This has been also referred to as the Good Samaritan Bill. And there's currently 18 states that have a Good Samaritan law, and another 9 are considering a similar law. House Bill 2516 would create a law providing the immunity from civil liability for damage to a motor vehicle for a person who enters the vehicle by force or otherwise to remove a vulnerable person or domestic animal if the person entering determines the vehicle is locked or there is otherwise no reasonable method for the vulnerable person or domestic animal to exit the vehicle without assistance. There's been some alarming statistics over the years as far as the number of deaths of children that were left in a hot vehicle. There's been over 800 deaths nationwide since 1990, 10 of those in Kansas. Quick action is always essential in an event like this. On an 80-degree day, a closed vehicle in direct sunlight can have temperatures rise upwards of 110 degrees in just a matter of a few minutes, say 10 minutes. So time is of the essence for a person to react. There were several proponents, including the Helping Hands Humane Society, the Humane Society Legislative Fund of Kansas, Humane Society of Greater Kansas City, Humane Society of the United States, and a few others. There were no opponents. There was just a comment on the fiscal note that with this law becoming passed in Kansas, that the reduction of tort claims, we have a cap of $500,000 in our state, against any local or state government would be minimized. And so therefore, I will stand for questions.
To speak to the bill, the chair recognizes Representative Hodge.
Body, the carrier of the bill explained the contents very well. We've had too many of these stories. We've all been confronted with them. When we see a situation where we don't have time to ask ourselves, what are the ramifications? We simply need to act, and this bill allows that to happen. So I urge your support of this bill. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Brim of Johnson County.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have been working on this since last summer with the children advocacy groups and animal groups as well, and this is a good bill. There was a situation earlier this year in Merriam where a child was left in a vehicle, and there were a lot of people standing around the vehicle and no one taking any action until the store owner came out and did break the window, and at that point she could be liable and be sued. This will just give some protection to those people who take that initiative and make sure that we are protecting our vulnerable. So with that, thank you for your support on this bill.
Does anyone else wish to speak to the bill? Representative Ellett, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I move that when the committee rises and reports, it reports House Bill 2516 favorably for passage.
You've heard the motion of Representative Elliott to report House Bill 2516 favorably. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next order of business is House Bill 2527. For the purposes of carrying House Bill 2527, the chair recognizes Representative Phillips.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There were committee amendments. I move adoption of the committee report.
You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. Committee report is adopted. Representative, you may continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This bill is brought to you from the House Taxation Committee. Basically, it would establish a new crime for involving sales suppression devices used in retail businesses that rely greatly on cash transactions. And a sales suppression device is kind of a software program that would allow you to really have kind of two sets of books to indicate cash flowing into the business, and as a result reduce sales tax revenue back to the state of Kansas. This bill is modeled after legislation that was approved by the Georgia Legislature in 2011. Since then, there have been about half the states that collect sales tax that have passed similar legislation. This is really seen as a deterrent to a growing issue across the country. There were committee amendments. The bill was originally drafted, had the crime being prosecuted at a level 6, and the committee lowered it to a level 7 non-person felony, which allows for the individual to be placed on probation as opposed to being placed directly into the jail system. So that kind of summarizes the bill, and so at this point I will, the fiscal note, the Division of Budget indicates there could be a cost to the state if there were prosecutions and individuals eventually ended up in the prison system. We're not anticipating that being a big problem for the state. We truly believe that most of our business owners are good law-abiding citizens, and there won't be a prevalent issue with this particular kind of situation. So with that, I'll now stand for questions.
To speak to H. Bill 2527, the chair recognizes Representative Sawyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in support of the bill. I think the carrier did a pretty good job explaining the bill. Basically, there's these devices that called zappers or sales suppression devices that kind of create a second set of books that businesses could use to avoid paying sales tax and possibly reduce their income tax. These devices have not shown up yet in Kansas, but they have shown up in other states, and the state of Kansas is wanting to be proactive, so I do rise in support of the bill.
Further discussion? If there's no further discussion, Representative Phillips, you may close.
Mr. Chair, I move that when the committee rises and report House Bill 2527 favorable for passage.
You've heard the motion by Representative Phillips to report House Bill 2527 favorably. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Motion passes. Final item on the agenda is Senate Bill 335. For the purposes of carrying Senate Bill 335, the chair recognizes Representative Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Move adoption of the committee report. There were committee amendments, so I move the adoption of the report.
You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. Committee report is adopted.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. So what Senate Bill 335 does is it amends the state banking code, allowing to include savings and loan associations and savings banks. This bill, what it does, it amends existing bank statutes to incorporate references to saving and loan associations and savings banks where applicable, and by enacting several new provisions. This would allow any savings and loan association to become a state chartered and still maintain its existing ownership structure, whether it's a mutual form or stock ownership. So back in '93, the Kansas legislature abolished the Kansas Savings and Loan Department and office of the Savings and Loan Commissioner and transferred all the powers and duties of the office to the office of the State Bank Commissioner. So this is going to allow, currently there are 9 savings and loans operating within the state of Kansas, and this would just allow them the opportunity, should they desire to not be under the federal umbrella, they could be under the state charter. And so with that, I stand for questions.
To speak to the bill, the chair recognizes Representative Ward.
I like this bill. This bill, would the carrier stand for a couple of questions? This bill has a lot of sections that deal with TANF and Medicaid, and could you explain why that's in this bill?
Oh, does it? So, though there are references to TANF, it's not relevant to what the bill is wanting to do.
It's relevant to what I want to do.
Of course it is. Naturally. I would expect no less.
What's really interesting about this bill is there is a principle in law called stare decisis. It's Latin that means consistency in judicial decisions. It should not be about the personalities that serve as a judge, but the law should be consistent through time. And the same should be true about the rules and germaneness. In this bill, on page 34, lines 29 through 36, is an interesting piece of law that was carried as an amendment. And we call it the Schultz Amendment, and what it says in summary is that Medicaid shall not be expanded in this state by the governor without specific approval of the legislature. It cites the Medicaid statute. It talks specifically about expanding Medicaid, and it was carried. And you know what? We didn't like that amendment, so we challenged the germaneness. It was found germane and put in this law that is now before us, as the carrier said, not relevant to the underlying bill. We didn't think it was relevant to the underlying bill 4 years ago, but today we think it's highly relevant. And with that, Mr. Chair, I have an amendment.
The amendment appears long. Representative, would you care to explain your amendment?
I would be happy to. I want you to, for those of you who were here just 1 year ago, rewind your brain. A different legislator was here with an amendment that expanded Medicaid to 138% of poverty, and the lady from Beloit did a fine job. This is her amendment, only it's now being placed on a Senate bill. It says to 150,000 Kansans, yes, you can have insurance that we have already paid for. It brings $2 billion plus in economic vitality to our healthcare sector. In every one of your communities, healthcare is one of the 2 or 3 biggest employers in your community. It provides security to doctors and nurses and health clinics and hospitals. It's economically the right thing to do. It's morally the right thing to do. And today is the day we can do it for Kansas. And here's the benefit of putting it in this bill. It goes directly to conference, and we can get this to our new governor and give him an opportunity to weigh in on what he thinks about health care in our state. And so with that, I will stand for questions. Now this is where you can do
Speak to the amendment. Chair recognizes Representative Powell.
This is where you can do what you're going to do.
So, thank you, Mr. Chair. And just clarifying, the references to the TANF were dealing with statute, and those have been struck. They were on page 45, line 30. And so, at any rate, I challenge the germaneness of this amendment.
I'm shocked.
Germaneness has been challenged. The Rules Chair will make the decision. The body will come to order. The Rules Chair, Representative Finch, make a ruling on the germaneness of Representative Ward's amendment to Senate Bill 335.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, members of the body, I came out with 2 copies of the bill and no copies of the rules. So, the ultimate test of germaneness, and I could go on for a long time talking about it, but I won't bore you with all of the details. But both our rules and Mason's manual talk about germaneness and about whether the amendment is relevant, appropriate, and a natural and logical sequence to the subject matter of the original proposal. More than any other test of factors in germaneness is what is the subject matter? In other words, what does the bill do and what does the amendment do, and whether the two are connected. In the case before the Rules Committee today, the underlying bill is a bill about state savings bank charters. It is an attempt to clear up language and harmonize it across several statutes where we find state savings banks in our code. And if anyone looks at the architecture of the bill, you'll see that. Clearly on the front page, there's a list of statutes that go on and on and on and cover various parts of the law. There is no doubt, as the maker of the amendment said, that some years ago a decision was made that one of those statutes in a bill at the time was germane to an amendment concerning Medicaid. I don't recall all of the specifics of that case, but the case before us today is whether or not an amendment to adopt the Bridge to a Healthy Kansas is germane to a bill whose subject matter is clarifying the charter for state savings banks. There is a plain language connection between that section that was added several years ago to the bill and this amendment. But what is being done by this bill doesn't affect that part of that statute. It simply strikes and replaces words to grant a state savings bank the right to charter under the laws of the state of Kansas. It is not affecting whether someone is eligible for public benefits. It is not affecting whether or not someone is eligible for Medicaid or their health care generally. The committee has discussed it and I find that there is one point of contact, but there are not 2 sufficient to find the amendment germane today, and therefore I rule that the amendment is not germane.
Representative Ward.
For those of you who actually follow rules debate, the first point of contact is on page 34, lines 29 through 36, where it specifically addresses Medicaid expansion. Now, I want you to go back 4 years ago, take that language out. It's not there. A rules chair ruled that all of the other language in this bill, other than the new strikings and addings today, made a Medicaid expansion amendment germane. The exact same language made it germane 4 years ago. What's different? Well, the first row liked the amendment 4 years ago and don't like the amendment today. The second point of contact is on page 37, lines 19, where it references 2 statutes that include 39709, and if you were to go to 39709 and go to the part that talks about Medicaid requirements. So today we're hearing not only do you need 2 points of contact, but you can't have an amendment that doesn't actually talk about what's in the bill. This language is in the bill. It has never been a rule that says, well, yeah, but this isn't the important language. There is more important language in a different part that makes it more germane or less germane. What has been said is you have a piece of legislation before you. We had a rule until today that says if you can find 2 points of contact, an amendment is germane and we can discuss it. If you don't like the amendment, vote against it. Don't use the rules to prevent a debate. And with that, I will challenge the ruling of the Rules Chair. And I think
The ruling of the Rules Chair has been challenged. I will remind the body that this is a debatable motion and is debatable by the following people: the member making the motion to amend, Representative Ward; the member carrying the measure to be carrying the measure to be amended, Representative Powell; Majority Leader or his designee, and the Minority Leader or his designee. Yep. The body, the Majority Leader is designated Representative Hawkins to speak for the majority, and the Minority Leader is designated Representative Hodge to speak. And we can go in any order, I guess. You want? Okay. Representative Ward says he's going to let you guys go first, so Representative Powell or Hawkins. You want to speak?
Yeah, I'd like to speak. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of points that I would like to make, body, is in the years past when this was originally, this amendment was really originally brought up, the minority side challenged it then. So they challenged the rules chair at that time. The rules chair made a decision, and that was challenged. So they didn't like it then. Now we're faced with a situation where we're bringing up it's a very contentious issue on a relatively minor banking bill. We do have many opportunities left in this session, I guarantee you. We do have a bill on the Senate side that is in play. It's sitting underneath the line. Do we know what's going to happen? I cannot speculate what can happen. None of us can speculate what can happen. But this is a banking bill. This is a single subject having to do with banking, and I would ask for you to take that into your consideration and allow this bill to move forward and to defeat the challenge to the rules chair. Our rules chair has been very, very consistent this year, really consistent. Every time he rules, what does he do? He gives us the facts. He gives us the points of contact, if there is a point of contact, and if there's only one, he tells us that. If there's more than one, then he rules germane. Our rules chair has done a fine job, and our rules committee has done a fine job, and I would ask you to support the rules chair and the rules committee in their decision. Thank you.
Representative Hodge.
Good morning, body. Thanks for the opportunity to allow me to explain a position that we could go on and on about the policy regarding this this amendment. Obviously, this is something that the state needs. Obviously, this is something that's been in committee and has tried to get out of committee without much success. So I believe that's why we're here. We're trying our best to get something to Kansans that they desperately need. All of us have health insurance. Why can't other people have health insurance? But for now, what we're doing is making an argument regarding the germaneness of this amendment and the rules that we've been given, or the suggestions that we've been given, and the previous decisions have been based on 2 points of contact. And I'm here to suggest to you Since all this body is doing right now is deciding, are there 2 points of contact? I'd suggest to you there's tons of contact in this bill. Let's start off with the temporary assistance for needy families section of the bill on page 24. There's several places in that part of the bill, and let me make sure I'm in the right spot. Excuse me, it starts on page 25. Eligibility requirements for temporary assistance for needy families. There's at least 1 point of contact in those words. Then you move on to the fact that the same bill moves to a statute numbered 172263, which specifically discusses Medicaid eligibility in the form of statute 39709 sub E. The next statute that is struck through in the bill is 17-2264. It specifically works on statute 39709E. That's the third point of contact. If you'd like me to go on, I can, but this statute is intertwined with Medicaid eligibility. I had no idea that there was extra historical context that the other representative referred to. Just for consistency's sake, we should make sure that this is germane. Let alone, let me close with this, let alone we actually have a debate on this issue. Where has it been? It came here last year, we tried, we got close, it didn't go anywhere. Here we are again. Let's be consistent, body. If you vote against the germaneness of this amendment, you are voting against Medicaid expansion in Kansas. With that, I close. This is a germane amendment.
Chair recognizes Representative Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Any and all references to TANF in this bill are internal references, and they deal more with housekeeping. So a number of statutes needed to be cleaned up, so that has no purpose as far as the bill's content or meaning or subject matter of the bill. And I would agree with former speaker that who spoke to the fairness of the Rules Chair has been consistent this year, and I can say I'd made up my mind. If this would have been found germane, I would have not have challenged it. I trust our Rules Chair and the Rules Committee. They've always done a good job. They speak in plain English. They lay it out, whether you have 1 or 2 points of contact or more. And so I encourage the body, when we're called to vote on this, that you would vote the germaneness of this down. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Ward.
Fundamentally, we're having this debate because we can't have a Medicaid expansion debate. Medicaid expansion has never come to this floor through the process of a committee putting it forward for a debate. The only time we had an opportunity to get a hearing after 2 years and hundreds of millions of dollars lost and people dying was I carried an amendment on a breast milk bill that was found germane. And a good friend of mine who I respected from Emporia came down and asked me not to force a vote that day, but to talk to the speaker about getting a hearing on Medicaid expansion. It took an amendment that was germane on this floor to get a hearing. And at that time, the speaker agreed if I would withdraw my amendment, that he would give us a hearing. And we packed the hearing room with hundreds of Kansans who support Medicaid expansion, doctors and nurses and clinics and anesthesiologists, and every one of the health, whether you're heart, cancer, emphysema, MS, all came in and said, this is good policy. Last year, we actually got a vote but not because a bill was brought to the floor, but because we had to use the amendment process. And while it's legalistic, stare decisis is there. This isn't about the personalities of the rules chair. It is about a consistent body that we all can know how you bring amendments to the floor. I agree with one of the speakers that I fought against that amendment when it happened. It really happened in the Senate. And it was a partisan line vote, and it was put on. Okay, you can't change the rules. If it's good for you, you have to deal with it when it's not good for you. And play by the rules even if you don't like the amendment. And there are at least 2 points of contact and more in this bill. You've added another layer, which is, well, the intent of the bill wasn't to describe Medicaid expansion. Well, that's not the rule until today. This is a housekeeping bill. Well, you've used the tools presented. It's a tool that works. It is germane. I ask that you vote no, which would mean you do not support the ruling of the chair. If you support the ruling of the chair, it's a yes vote. If you do not support the ruling of the chair and want to vote on Medicaid expansion today, it's a no vote. Thank you.
The question arises, shall the chairperson's ruling be sustained? Again, as Representative Ward explained, a yes vote agrees with the rules chair, a no vote disagrees with the rules chair. So you've heard the, oh yes, I'm sorry. All those who are in favor of sustaining the rules chair, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. No. Chair's in doubt. A division. Seeing 15 hands, roll call is in order. Has everyone had an opportunity to record their vote? Clerk will close the roll. 78. Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. Does anybody desire to change their vote? Is there an explanation? Where's Representative Brim? Votes no. Anyone else desire to change their vote, his or her vote? Clerk will close the roll. Take the tally. 77 voting in favor and 45 no. The motion fails. Chair recognizes Representative Ward.
I have another good idea that we haven't had an opportunity to debate on this floor. There's a proposal to extend canned care for another 5 years. And in the proposal, it has work requirements and a lifetime cap. And I have an amendment that addresses that.
The amendment appears short. The clerk will read. It's only
Page 34, line 29, by striking all after the period, by striking all in lines 30 through 33, and line 34 by striking all before the second comma and inserting neither the Department of Health and Environment nor the Kansas Department for Aging and Disability Services shall impose or require any requirements to receive state Medicaid services relating to work requirements for eligibility, lifetime eligibility limits, or the imposition or assessment of premiums. Also on page 34 in line 35 by striking the expansion of and inserting such requirements to receive state. On page 1 in the title in line 1 by striking financial institutions and inserting state agencies. Also in line 1 by striking all after 2, by striking all in line 2. In line 3 by striking all before the second semicolon and inserting the Office of the State Bank Commissioner, regulating savings and loan associations, the Department of Health and Environment, the Kansas Department for Aging and Disability Services, regulating the provision of state Medicaid services.
Representative Ward, you care to explain your amendment?
Go back to page 34, lines 29 through 36, and I will summarize what that section says. It says that Medicaid expansion shall not occur without legislative approval. That's what that section does. What this amendment does is strike the language about Medicaid expansion and insert language that says the governor shall not impose work requirements, lifetime caps, or premiums on Medicaid without first getting legislative approval. Same intent as the section in the law, takes the Medicaid expansion piece out and puts in work requirements, cap, and premiums. All it says is we have to vote to do that. The governor can't do it unilaterally. With that, I will stand for questions.
Anyone wish to speak to the amendment? Stand by, body. Chair recognizes Representative Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So again, this goes back to the purpose of why this content is in there on page 34. The whole purpose of why you're seeing this in there is we're striking 2 references to statutes. And again, this is a housekeeping issue, and the bill is tied to one subject matter, which is allowing the savings and loans banks to be chartered in the state of Kansas under the banking code. That is the sole subject of this, and it's been alluded to before. If you look at the front of this bill, there are countless statutes that are being revised as a purpose of house cleaning. Part of this deals with the statutes in the savings and loan banking. Part of those hadn't been updated since the 40s. So some of the language needs to be updated and revised, but this is solely for the purpose of house cleaning. So this lands on the same argument as the prior argument, and so I challenge its germaneness, Mr. Chair.
Germaneness has been challenged once again. Would the Rules Chair, Representative Finch, make a ruling on the germaneness of Representative Ward amendment to Senate Bill 335? To make a ruling on the germaneness, Chair recognizes Representative Finch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the body. Again, as we review Senate Bill 335 and the subject matter of the bill about state savings bank charters, the amendment in this case makes changes specifically on page 34 and attempts to regulate or change requirements concerning reception of state Medicaid services, requirements for eligibility, lifetime limits, and imposition of assessment of premiums, etc. It is the same theory that the committee used last time to find that that amendment was not germane. There are not 2 points of contact sufficient to find that the subject matter of the amendment and the underlying bill are in fact germane to one another, and therefore the ruling is that this amendment is also not germane.
Chair recognizes Representative Ward.
Ruling. I'm not going to challenge this ruling, but this is another topic that you're being denied an opportunity to weigh in that will have a significant impact on the citizens of your district. But I have another idea. Based on the rulings, I have another amendment. And with that, it's very short. It might be better if I explain it.
The amendment appears short. Would you like to explain your amendment?
Yes. This is a handwritten amendment why they're explaining it. What I'm doing is that section that we clearly believe today is not germane and is not part of this housekeeping. It's on page 34, starting in lines 29 through 36, that says Medicaid can't be expanded without legislative approval. Let's get rid of it, because clearly it's not germane. It shouldn't be in here. It's not part of the housekeeping. So what my amendment does is strike everything after recipient through lines 36, so we don't have any more confusion that everything's germane except in this area of Medicaid expansion. It says all of that section is deleted from this housekeeping bill, and it clearly is not germane because the chair has ruled twice that Medicaid should not be in this language, so let's get it out of there. With that, I'll stand for questions.
Anyone wish to speak to the Ward amendment? Oh, I'm sorry. That's right. Does anyone object to the waiving the reading of the amendment? There is objection. The clerk will read.
Page 34, line 29, by striking all language after recipient, starting with the word medical assistant, all language thereafter, and all in line 30 through 36.
Chair recognizes Representative Schwab of Johnson on the amendment. I do recognize you, by the way.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I challenged it. No, I'm just kidding. I remember voting on this because I didn't think it would be good to relinquish legislative authority on Medicaid to the second floor and let the governor determine what Medicaid expansion would be, and then we would have to fund it, regardless of what he did. And we would have to pass another law to undo what the governor would do. I think that policy should be made in this body. But if you guys want to allow the governor to just make that policy on their own, then support the amendment. I don't support it because I still say it should be made here. We had a vote last year. I don't know if there'll be another one this year or not, but I mean, until we find a way to fund it, I don't understand how we can, just relinquish it to the governor and then have them kick it to us to funding. If it's a tax increase, he's going to veto it, possibly veto it. Sorry. So that being said, I oppose the amendment.
Anyone else wish to speak to the amendment? Chair recognizes Representative Whipple.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Body, we voted on this last year. I think we have made our position clear to the then governor. Now we have a new governor, and we have 77 members in this body who just declined having this debate. You have just said, I don't want to have this debate at all. Therefore, we have now forfeited or not forfeited, but essentially forfeited, given the timing of where we are in session, our ability to have this debate. So let's let the governor have it. We have a new governor. If the governor chooses to expand, then I don't think we should stand in the way when less than 10 minutes ago, we just told the world that we don't even want to debate this. So if we're not going to debate it, at least give the people of Kansas a chance to voice their opinion to the other executive branch, the governor. I stand in support of this amendment. I ask you to do so as well. Thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak to the amendment? You want to speak? Seeing no one, you may close. Representative Ward.
I listened, the Speaker Pro Tem and I came in together. We don't agree a lot, but I listened to his opinion because we do agree sometimes. I'm really kind of surprised his argument because we haven't had a chance to discuss CanCare and turning over Medicaid to 3 private insurance companies. We never got a vote on that. We can't talk about CanCare being expanded or not expanded, but another 5 years of that kind of premise. We just turned down an amendment to discuss whether or not it's appropriate for the governor to impose work requirements or lifetime caps, and if there's a benefit to that, or premiums. There are many times when it's convenient that we don't weigh in with the governor. And I think it's really telling that this housekeeping bill, and this is not really language that's important unless we say take it out, and then all of a sudden it becomes really important. This is about what this body does on one of the most important issues that the people of Kansas are demanding action, and with that I'll move my amendment.
You've heard the motion to amend. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The noes appear to have it. The noes do have it. Motion fails. We're back on the bill. Anyone else wish to speak to the bill? Representative Trimmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And no matter how you feel about the amendments, the underlying bill is a very good piece of legislation. It allows credit unions, or savings and loans, and savings banks to be chartered in the state of Kansas. It does one other thing that's kind of a secondary effect. It allows those agencies or those banks and savings and loans to be able to invest in bonds that are local, municipal bonds. And that really helps any of our institutions that do bonds sell more bonds, and it allows them to include that in their portfolio. So for that reason, I would urge your support of this piece of legislation.
Anyone else wish to speak to the bill? Representative Powell, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I move that when the committee rises and reports, it reports Senate Bill 335 favorably for passage.
You've heard the motion by Representative Powell to report Senate Bill 335 favorably. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Motion passes. This concludes general orders. Chair recognizes Majority Leader Heineman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move we rise and report.
You've heard the motion to rise and report. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes.
Clerk will read the committee of the whole report.
Mr. Speaker, your Committee of the Whole recommends House Bills 2516 and 2527 and Senate Bill 335 be passed as amended.
Speaker recognizes Representative Powell. Sorry, Garber. Sorry. Someone needs to turn off their light.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. I move the adoption of the committee report.
You heard the motion. All in favor say aye. Opposed, same. Motion passes. Reports of standing committees. The clerk will read.
Committee on Financial Institutions and Pensions recommends House Bill 2764 be amended. The bill be passed as amended. Committee on Higher Education Budget recommends House Bill 2644 be passed. Committee on Higher Education Budget recommends Senate Bill 343 be passed. Because the committee is of the opinion the bill of a non-controversial nature be placed on the consent calendar. Committee on Federal and State Affairs recommends House Bill 2308 be amended. The bill be passed as amended. Committee on Federal and State Affairs recommends Senate Bill 369 be passed. Because the committee is of the opinion the bill of a non-controversial nature be placed on the consent calendar. Committee on Taxation recommends House Bill 2755 be passed. Because the committee's opinion the bill is a non-controversial nature be placed on the consent calendar. Committee on Elections recommends Senate Bill 264 be amended by substituting a new bill to be designated as House Substitute for Senate Bill 264 as follows: an act concerning elections relating to application and ballot signature requirements for disabled voters relating to the crime of perjury. The substitute bill be passed. Committee on Commerce, Labor, and Economic Development recommends House Bill 2526 be amended. The bill be passed as amended. Committee on Agriculture recommends Senate Bill 331 be amended. The bill be passed as amended.
Announcing change of reference, House Bill 2594 is withdrawn from the Committee on Appropriations and referred to the Committee of Financial Institutions and Pensions. Announcements. Representative Parker will replace Representative Hodge on the House Judiciary Committee for Wednesday, March 14th only. Further announcements. Representative Francis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Rural Caucus will still meet today in room 159 South immediately upon adjournment, and we're going to have a presentation about transportation needs in Kansas. Our host will be Economic Lifelines, and we'll have barbecue.
Representative Esau.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. The House Elections Committee will not be meeting today. Thank you.
Representative Victors.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. South Central delegation, we will not have a meeting today, just FYI, but we do plan to meet next Wednesday. Thank you.
Representative Clayton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. Members of the Johnson County delegation, we still have our luncheon meeting that is in room 144 South. We will be hearing from United Community Services today. Please attend. Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem.
Representative Finch.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. Two announcements for the House Judiciary Committee. First, we will have an informational hearing today on the Kansas Open Records Act as that concept is explored in Senate Bill 295. And that will be today at 3:30 in our normal room. And then we will not, Judiciary Committee will not meet tomorrow, Thursday at 3:30. Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem.
Representative Alcala.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Shawnee County delegation will meet right after we get off the floor in 118 North, and lunch will be provided. Thank you.
Representative Probst.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Broadband Lunch and Learn will meet Thursday, March 15th in room 281 North immediately following session. Daniel Friesen from IDTech will be the speaker. He's an independent fiber internet provider, and this will be on your own lunch.
Representative Schroeder.
Thank you, Mr. Pro Tem. Tomorrow morning is our prayer breakfast once again. We have a guest speaker by the name of Chris Stewart. He's the executive director of The Bridge, which is an inner city ministry here in Topeka, so should be interesting again. We've had some really good speakers. Hope you can join us tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. and 142 South. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Pro Tem.
Representatives Corbett and Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, once again, we're getting close to the time for our Sportsman Caucus annual fishing tournament and Sportsman Clay Shoot.
Yes, sir. So the dates are right at the top, the 23rd and the 24th. As you know, it's a great chance to get outdoors. It doesn't cost you guys anything. You can bring one guest at no charge. So if you want to go fishing or shoot some clays or break some clays, at the bottom, give Joan a call. She'll make all your arrangements. And for those of you who might want to get there on a Sunday before the fishing tournament, give her a call. She might be able to find you a cabin. But we furnish guides and boats. It's pretty cool deal. So hope to see a lot of you out there.
It's a good time. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Ballard.
Thank you, Mr. Stop it. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Democrats, Thursday summit tomorrow on adjournment. Let's hope it's 12 noon, thereabouts, at 152 South. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Whipple.
Members of the Democratic Caucus, we will have agenda tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. in the morning, 8:30 a.m. tomorrow. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further announcements? Seeing none, Majority Leader Heineman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Republicans, we will have calendar review at 8:30 in the morning in the old Supreme Court room. Mr. Speaker, I move the House adjourn until Thursday, March 15th at 11 a.m.
You heard the motion. All in favor say aye. Opposed, same. Motion passes. We are adjourned.